7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
So today I'm with Frankanderson, and I'm really, really happy that we can talk together about his parcours, his job, all those past years around trauma, until his new book, which is To Be Loved. So we're going to talk about. Hi, Frank. Thank you for
Hello.
being there with us.
It's lovely to be here. It's lovely. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're a psychiatrist.
Mhm.
You've been trained in IFS. It's been like something very transformative for you, IFS, Internal Family Systems.
Yeah.
And you've just launched a new book, To Be
Mhm.
Loved. But in those many years,
Yes.
and you've been one of the first with Bessel van der Kolk that we are here with to talk about trauma and how trauma is important, how it impacts our lives. So what have you seen the evolution? Why has it been so important in your life and in the life of your patients and clients?
Yeah, it was lovely to hear Bessel talk this morning at the keynote. He did a beautiful job of like where we were and where we're going, where we were, where we are, and where we're going, right? And I was been with him since 1992, so it's been a long time. And back then, it was very primitive and very basic. Even the models weren't in existence then. I was one of the first people to be trained in EMDR. He met Francine Shapiro. Bessel, in the way that he does, brings these models to the forefront for us. So I was trained in EMDR, and I was one of the early people to do that. And then he met Pat Ogden, and he brought sensory motor psychotherapy in. He brought Peter Levine into the world of trauma, all these model makers. I was there at Bessel's conference the first time Stephen Porges ever spoke to our group. So it was lovely to be a part of this evolution. And all of these model makers have done wonderful things in the advancement of our field. So I feel so privileged to have been kind of watching it all evolve over the years. And you know, I think this whole piece around IFS, certainly, I remember 2004, I think, is when I met Dick Schwartz. He was at Bessel's conference. I was like, oh, I'll go to this workshop. So it was the first time I met him. I was doing a psychopharmacology and trauma workshop, and Dick Schwartz introduced internal family systems in 2004. So it's been great to see all the evolution here. And now, you know, the next big thing clearly is the psychedelics. Everybody's talking about the psychedelics, right? Everybody's talking about the psychedelics. And I think we have a lot to learn, and there's going to be a lot that it's going to offer our field. So it's kind of interesting to be a part of the evolution. My passion, and this is probably part of the evolution of my books, right, is integration. I really feel strongly about integration. I feel like all these models have been created, which has been amazing. And I feel like we need to put them together to move forward now. So this is something that I'm really kind of focusing on. The other thing I'm focusing on is how to bring this information to the general public, because there's too much trauma and not enough therapists, in my view. So that's where I'm focusing on, is how do we get this out to people who are doing all these really wonderfully creative things, bringing it into sports or bringing it into the school system, dance. I worked with a professional dancer, to bring dance, trauma movement into dance, you know, so how do we also expand outside of psychotherapy? It's one of the reasons this book, my third book, is like, this is a book for the general public. I mean, certainly therapists can read the book and learn about their own experiences or learn about what their clients might be going through as I share my trauma story. But it is the movement for me into the general public in that way, to get the message out to the world.
So can we talk about those three books and how you articulate them together? Because we are at Quantum Way are going to translate the three of them.
Yes.
Not at the same time, so they will come one after another.
Yes.
So what is the evolution and how did you get from from the first book to the third one?
It's interesting, and I will talk about the fourth one because I just got off a call about, okay, what's next, Frank? I said, let's this one get released first before we talk about the next one. But it does feel like a natural evolution, that I will say, because the first book, Internal Family Systems Skills Training Manual, is really how-to. It's step by step. How do you do internal family systems, right? And I wrote that book with co-authored that with Martha Sweezy and also with Dick Schwartz. So it was kind of the first offering for therapists outside the IFS trainings to give people a how-to do the internal family system. So and that book has been wildly popular. It's translated in many languages all over the world. People were dying for this information. So it was really great to put the basis out there, the manual.
And so that's not only for IFS therapists.
No, it's not for only. A lot of their clients have bought the book. There's exercises in there. There's steps to do things. How do you get to know a protective part? How do you exercises around accessing self-energy, another thing that IFS talks about. So it's for clients, it's for therapists alike, right? So it's learning about the model. So that was a good foundation, right? And then for me, the second book, Transcending Trauma, really was my life's work, like professionally. I will say that. I've been talking workshops on neuroscience, IFS, and trauma for many, many years. And so for me, I'm particularly proud of that book for the reason of, all right, Frank, put all of your knowledge together into one place. So it really integrates neuroscience, complex PTSD, relational trauma, which is what most therapists see in their offices, right? And then neuroscience knowledge. So that was a really important book for me to do. I kind of had this idea like, okay, world, here's the knowledge that I've been accumulating over the years. So that was an important book for me to do, to get the way I expanded the IFS model, for example. I have different ways of looking at it. I use the basics and then expand it, particularly for trauma. So I don't know that there's another IFS trauma book out there. You know, this is the IFS trauma book, integrating neuroscience. So I was very happy and proud of that book. Separate from Learn the Model, this is Learn the Model as it relates to trauma, particularly relational trauma. So that felt really good. And then right away, Frank, write a memoir. It's like, what? Write a memoir. I was like, oh my goodness, really? You know, and that makes sense to me then after I got my work out there in this way. It's like, tell your story, right? And I often, all the workshops I do, I say I have a trauma history. I think it's really important to break down this divide. I'm the expert. You're the one with the trauma history. Like, no. I could out every trauma expert and say you wouldn't even be in this field unless you had some kind of personal connection to it, right? So why do we pretend? So this book is very revealing. It is like I couldn't write this unless I had done a lot of healing, because I talk about all the ways I've been harmed, all the ways I've harmed, right? I thought that was very important to say, not only am I an expert, I also have a trauma history. Not only am I a victim, I'm also a perpetrator, because everyone is all of these things. And that was an important message in this book, the memoir. The other thing I'll say about it is forgiveness after healing was something I didn't even know existed until I wrote the book and went through I went through healing beyond healing with my father relationally. So I learned a whole dimension of trauma healing. I think about forgiveness after healing trauma now. And so there's a lot of teaching through story in this third book, To Be Loved. And one of the biggest impacts for me is when people read it, say, oh my goodness, I can relate. oh my goodness, I had a relationship like that. Oh my goodness, I did things like that. So that really lights up my soul when I hear people relating to my story, because these stories are unique in some ways, but they're also universal themes around being harmed, being hurt, being alone, being shamed, being harmful, right? Healing journey. So they're universal themes. And I just love that more than anything is the way people so far have been impacted by my story.
And so what is the, I've interviewed Peter Levine on his last book, but it's
Yes,
also a
I know.
biography or a memoir.
Yes.
And he was saying that writing the book obliged him or made him go into some traumas he didn't even
Yes.
know about.
100%.
And how was this book for you? Did you have the feeling that you had done the most
Yes.
healing work before, or was
Yeah.
it the healing
I
work?
thought I did all the work before. I mean, I've been in therapy for 33 years. That's a long time, right? And I don't suggest everybody being in therapy for 33 years. I'm not saying that, but I had healed a lot. So there's a truth to that. I couldn't have written this book if I hadn't healed, honestly, because to speak about these things that are so vulnerable, you have to feel comfortable with it. So I did a lot of healing work, but there were a couple pieces that very much surprised me around the healing journey. One was loving someone who harmed you. Like I did not even think that was a possibility. To truly forgive somebody and to truly love someone, even if they've harmed you. So that was a surprise for me.
You're talking about your father?
Yes, talking about my father. Like I did not think that was possible. That came through the writing process. It was a different level of healing through writing. I do courses now called Write to Heal, right? Because there's a different level of access in writing than there is in talking or doing body work. The other piece, which I haven't talked about yet with anyone, is I always had this suspicion that I was sexually abused, but I didn't have any memories. And so I never wanted to fill in the blanks. I would never do that. And I understood through writing where my experience of sexual intrusion in my life came from, because I was overexposed to things when I was a child. And that created an experience of sexual violation for me. So I was like, oh my goodness, I've been in therapy forever, searching for the memories. But through this process of writing a memoir, I was like, oh my goodness, this is where that comes from. So that was a surprise for me to get clarity on what that whole sexual betrayal violation was for me. So it was very healing. I wrote this book for other people to relate to, and I didn't think I would do more healing than I had already done.
And talking about healing, how would you define healing? It's in French, it's kind of a hard word to translate. But it's interesting to know, what do you mean when you say heal or do the healing work and I have healed?
Yes, it's a great question. And I think about it keeps changing for me, because I would say 5 years ago, maybe I thought permanent healing was possible. Now I don't believe that anymore. There's always new layers of things that come up. I don't think anything is gone completely. I think we keep learning and growing and evolving. When I think about healing, I think about release and transformation. Those are the two words that come to mind. Releasing the trauma energy, releasing the things that we carry as a result of our overwhelming life experience. So I think there's a release component in healing, and I think there's a transformation. And it's a transformation back to the me before my trauma. Like there's this release of what you're carrying, and the transformation, in my experience and in the experience with my clients, is not becoming someone new. It's becoming the you before the trauma that changed you. So it brings you back to your authentic self, brings you back to your aligned, truth and purpose. So that's what I think of with healing, and it's never done. 2 weeks ago, I'm in a version with my mother who has a very hard time with this book, which I understand, but I'm doing more healing in regards to my relationship with her, which is very related to my trauma because she was more passive as my dad was more actively abusive. So I'm healing with her as we speak. The book's already written and I'm still healing. I don't think I'll ever be done.
You talked about also forgiveness after healing,
Yes.
So what is it? What is forgiveness? And that's also an interesting world.
It's a very activating word for people.
It is.
Very activating. When I post something on social media about forgiveness, it gets the most comments all the time. I don't want to forgive. You're pushing me to forgive. I'm like, no, I'm not pushing anybody to forgive. And we don't even talk about forgiveness in psychotherapy. We don't even teach about forgiveness in psychotherapy. So it's kind of something outside of psychotherapy, at least in the way that I've learned. I do believe, because of experience, myself as well as others, is that after that release and transformation, after you've let go of what you're carrying based on what happened to you, then I think about a choice of whether you want to deal with the relationship with the person who harmed you. So for me, forgiveness is a relational issue, which is separate from what am I carrying because of what happened to me. Some people will choose to do that. Some people will not. Some people don't even have the opportunity to do that, if people die or things like this. So I don't think of it as a requirement. I think of it as an extra layer of freedom. That's the way I think about it. Because much to my surprise, forgiveness is not about the person you're forgiving. It's about you releasing what you're carrying relative to the person who harmed you. So forgiveness was freedom for me. Forgiveness was elevation. Forgiveness was acceptance. Forgiveness was holding complexity. Forgiveness is seeing the humanity in the person who harmed you. So there's a lot of dimensions to it. And I teach a lot about this now. And, there was this place of loving. I will never forget the feeling when I put together the funeral for my father out of love. I was like, oh my gosh, it felt so expansive. And I felt so empowered. I was like, you love somebody who harmed you. Like, you are ultimately free. Like, what bigger freedom than to truly no longer be affected, hold resentment, hold anger, but to love despite what he did. Was very empowering. And not everybody wants that. Not everybody will get there. And that's okay. I don't want to, these are options. These are options for people and options that I've learned out of my own experience. And then I started reading all about forgiveness, Desmond Tutu and, Jack Cornfield. All these people talk about forgiveness. Rick Hansen. So, I started getting curious about forgiveness after my own experience. I was like, let me learn more about this. So now I like teaching about it in workshops because it does challenge people. It does challenge the party line of how we think about things in psychotherapy, and that's okay. That's what we're here to do, is expand our learning. It's the evolution of our field.
And you would understand someone who says, I cannot forgive it.
Yeah, then don't. You don't have to. That's totally fine.
We don't have to.
No, if you don't want to, you don't have to. Mm-hmm. That's the opposite of trauma.
And it doesn't have to. Maybe what you're saying is that it came to you, like, because of the healing and because you felt this freedom, this love, and it came to you.
Yes.
It's not you decided.
No.
It's not you who decided to forgive. Forgiveness came.
It happened.
And if you decide to forgive, maybe it's not a real forgiveness.
Right. There's a lot of forced forgiveness, which is bypassing healing. Forgive and forget. Move on. Like, that doesn't work, And a lot of cultures push forgiveness. A lot of religious organizations push forgiveness. It's a bypass when it's not authentic, in my experience. And yeah, people don't have to do that if they don't want to do that. It's okay. I think trauma forces you to do something you don't want to do. Let's not force forgiveness on someone, which just perpetuates the trauma, right?
You were saying, and I remember the question I wanted to ask, you were saying that healing is going back to the self you were before
Yes.
the trauma.
Yeah.
What about people who have this feeling that they've always carried the trauma, like they carry the trauma of their parents, grandparents, the transgenerational trauma,
Yes.
the cultural trauma. What about that? How can you heal from that? There's no before.
Yeah.
In our
yes,
conscious
there
life.
is. That's another thing. I'm sorry. Yes, you can also heal from transgenerational trauma. That's part of the beauty of healing. There's all cultural trauma, transgenerational trauma. So yeah, I even personally talk about past lives. Okay. I've done past life healing, right? The stuff that I carried and brought into this lifetime. Everybody doesn't hold that belief system. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I think, and I have this belief that anything could be healed. Anything can be released. We don't have to carry it, and it can be released. And I'm a walking example of that. Am I done? Hell no. Am I always going to be releasing things? Yes. Do we ever get to the point of fully healed? I don't believe that. I think maybe we get there when we transition from this human life into whatever is beyond. Maybe that's when we get there, but not here, not here in human form that I'm aware of. I don't know. And the Dalai Lama isn't fully healed. I don't think anybody is. I don't even know that's our goal. We keep evolving on a soul level is the way it feels to me.
And so it's a journey.
Yeah.
But it's lighter and lighter.
Yes. Easier, quicker, and lighter. This is what I feel. When things come up now, they come up, but they don't stay as long. They're not as intense. I don't get swallowed up by them. And I can move on and move beyond quicker.
We're trying to put together, so we've talked about the books, we're trying to put together also online course with you that we hope we will record this summer or before the end of the year. There's a lot of topics that we could talk about.
Yes.
Listening to you and saying, okay, we can put that and that and that and that. Well, the idea is also because it's kind of hard to get to IFS trainings, but I also heard you say IFS is part of, it's like a tool, it's a model that we can use in our therapy sessions as a therapist, but it's not whole.
Yeah.
You have to be like, have diversity in your interventions, etc. So I'm really happy that we can put a course together around IFS, but not only.
Yes, that's right. I think I like the idea of everyone having a base model. Like, what's your primary? And I think the primary has to do with who you are and what fits for you. And then expand on that, because every client doesn't need only one thing. Even one client doesn't need the same thing through their whole healing journey. So we have to be diverse and eclectic, in my view. I love Bessel said this. He's like, you don't build a house with just a hammer. Well, that's a beautiful analogy. You need a lot of different tools in order to build a house. And so I do believe that. And I love the IFS model because for me, it's the most complete and comprehensive, and different people need different things at different times.
So we'll have some IFS basics, but also some trauma.
Yes.
Healing journey.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know, toward forgiveness.
Yes.
So
that's right.
Yeah, that's a complete
that's
online
right.
course. Great.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Frank, for talking about with such a vulnerability and authenticity. Is there anything you want to tell our French-speaking people around the world, whether French, Belgium, Switzerland, Canada, Africa, and wherever they are in the world? What are the words you want to say to end this conversation?
Yeah, the thing that I want to say, because I am traveling all throughout the world now, that's part of where my life has brought me. And I really believe that two things are universal in everywhere I go is trauma and the resiliency of the human spirit. I see it everywhere, no matter where. Cambodia, China, France, it doesn't matter. The United States, everybody has trauma and everybody has this resilience in them to overcome it. So that's the message I'd like to leave with people.
Thank you so much. I
Thank
like
you.
this message.
Yes, beautiful.
That's why
Thank
we're
you.
doing Quantum Way.
Yes, of course, right? And we all have to do it together.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody can do it alone.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.